Well, hey, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. If you really quick want to give your introduction, who you are, what amazing thing you have put into this world, and then we'll get started to some of my questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Patrick Pianezza. I'm the co-writer of Code 3. I am an active paramedic, not working, but as far like I am licensed both nationally and here in the state of California. I have worked in EMS for well over a dozen years. I've done everything from ground to some flight missions, though I would never call myself a flight medic. And I even did a one call on a boat once, which is a story for a later time. And have loved EMS since I got started. And I got started in it when I was 19. Did it for about a dozen years as a clinician practicing. I've got a bachelor's degree in public relations, a master's degree in healthcare administration, both from the University of South Carolina. So if you think that USC is in Southern California, you are incorrect. And I'm happy to defend my football team against yours despite any and all objective criteria. uh, Ever since I stopped practicing in around 2010, 2011, I've been doing kind of project management, programmatic management for various health systems, focusing mostly on patient experience, marketing, communications, and writing. I've been published a few times with EMS World and EMS Magazine, as well as the Joint Commission, and now do kind of freelance consulting and education. So that's kind of me in a very brief nutshell. I'm married. I have a corgi, and I live in Southern California, and I've got an awesome little nephew. That's it's a lot of fun.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. It's like it was like a dream come true, right? You reaching out to us and was like, oh my gosh, no way is this actually happening. So I can't thank you enough for offering to come on. Super excited to kind of hear the story of, your background and how it moved into the movie. So just kind of a couple of questions about your background and how that then related to what we see on the screen for Code 3. Obviously, before you were a screenwriter, you were a paramedic. Where did your EMS journey start, and what originally drew you to EMS, you personally?
I'm going to answer the question in reverse. So my EMS origin story is really an accident. In fact, my entire EMS career was an accident. The short version is I was going to community college after high school in Springfield, Illinois, Lincoln Land Community College, which is a great place, plug for them. Um, and I was originally a biology major. I thought I was going to go to med school. And as I was looking through the course catalog, I was short on hours. So I'd gone on vacation and something happened at the registrar's office. And anyway, my class, some of my classes got canceled, and I needed to be a full-time student in order to stay on my parents' healthcare insurance at the time. And so I was madly flipping through the course catalog. This is back when course catalogs were on paper. Sorry, kids, I'm old. Um, and I just remember seeing 8 hours, and I was like, awesome, that's exactly what I needed. And I looked over, and it said EMT. And the literal, this is the original thought process in my brain was, it'll look good on a med school resume, and maybe I'll be useful if something bad ever happens. And that's it. That was all the forethought I had into EMS and my first foray into EMT school. And started there, fell in love with it from the get. My very first clinical shift at the hospital, I came in nervous, didn't know if I was going to be able to stomach it. I had no, my family wasn't in for weren't first responders. There was nothing like that. And so I walked into the ER, and after I checked in, they said, "Oh, good thing you got." They just started a code in the trauma room. Why don't you go check it out? And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I'm nervous, have no idea what's going on. And like, you couldn't have scripted a more Hollywood moment. Like, I opened the door, and this is back when the life packs had the paddles on them. And I just saw the doc lean over and going clear. And bam, they lit this guy up. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. I want to do this forever. Um, and that was really what hooked me. And so that's how I got into EMS. I went straight through all the way to paramedic school. I ended up working at that emergency room as an ER tech because I was too young to work for the ambulance company because their insurance required you to be, I think, 21 or 22 years old in order to drive. And I was a member of the Sherman Volunteer Fire Department. I joined them right after I got my EMT, so I could practice. So I'm a fireman as well. I used to be a fireman. I don't claim to have the knowledge that used to be. Uh, and that's how I got started in it. It was a lot of fun. I did it for about 4 years in Illinois in total while I was finishing up my associates in biology. Um, And yeah, that's how I got started. I forgot the second part of your question though. Or well, the first part. I answered the second part first.
Yeah, well, I mean, realistically, that's it, right? Where did your journey
Oh,
start, and how did it start, and then
oh
what
yeah,
drew you to the job? So I think
Sherman,
that
Illinois.
encompasses all of it. So, so how much of Code 3 is pulled directly from the things that you lived or felt and your experiences on the street?
All of it. All that's the number one question I got on set all the time was, did this really happen? And it was kind of like, you should see the stuff that we cut from the script. It's all real. I will say with this giant caveat, like no one scene is verbatim or one person. What I keep telling everyone is like all of the scenes are amalgamations of 12 years of experience. So it's not like, this one scene, like I'm not giving anything away. It's in the trailer. Like the heroin addict is not the one heroin addict at 1314 Dirt Lane. It's the, 100 heroin addicts that we've treated, kind of boiled into like the zaniest thing ever. And so the film really is 12 years of experience boiled into the craziest 24-hour shift that we could put on film. But all of them have intrinsic roots in reality. Like there's nothing that we hokied up or did anything crazy about. I could say I've personally experienced everything that's in that film, and I think that's why it resonates so well with the audiences of people that do the work. It's not over the top. We don't. We treat EMS, I think, with the nobility that it deserves, and all of that is pulled from very real experiences.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that's one thing. Walking away from having seen the film is, I was excited to see it. It might have seemed like a crazy 24-hour shift, but it seemed like a obtainable 24-hour shift of not just gory trauma, car explosions like we tend to see in most movies and television that try to depict what we do. It was amazingly done. So huge props for that. So at what point, like in your career, when you all this experience, at what point did you realize the stories that you were living needed to be like viewed outside of the back of the ambulance? Was there a pivotal moment where you were like, you had a passion to write a movie, or how did that work for you?
Not really. It was more organic. It was so for those 4 years while I was getting my associate's degree. I mean, I was living at home, and so at the dinner table, I had the big red pagers. If anybody works back then, know what I was talking about, the old Motorola waistband pagers. And so we'd be eating dinner around the house and telling stories to just literally my mom, dad, and brother. And the pager would scream, and I'd go run out the front door, and we'd go take care of our neighbors. But those stories were always kind of like my mom wouldn't believe it, and they kept saying, "Oh, you should write the story, or you should write this down, or write a book, or etc." And so I would the more memorable calls that I would have. I never was big on journaling. I think it's important, but it's just not a practice that I was able to do proficiently. But I'd write stuff down on like notepads, like this happened, or have a sticky note and be like, "Oh, remember, this funny thing or that." And I would always just kind of keep them in this like top drawer of this organizer I had for years and years and years. And so it was kind of like this dearth of information I had. And fast forward to when I'm at Carolina, I had to take part of my undergraduate coursework in public relations was I had to take a creative writing class. To be frank, I had no interest in a creative writing class. It wasn't something that I was particularly interested in. But one day I went to class early in the semester. I'd just come off this brutal 14-hour shift that was supposed to be 12. I think everybody who's listening to this has worked that shift. And I almost didn't go to class. And this professor kind of kicked his feet up on the desk and he said, if you want to tell a compelling story, write what you know. And I just thought, I'll tell you a story. I got a whole stack of stories. Um, and I literally went home, pulled those wads of paper out, and wrote this 36-page short story for college. And that was it. That the whole film, everything was a homework assignment. That's it. Like there was no dreams of Hollywood. There was no I'm going to make a movie out of it. This was a homework assignment that was really cathartic to write because I had all of these kind of notes over the years stashed away. And that's how the story came to be. It was a homework assignment that caught fire.
That's wild. That's so good. Like I've never heard you tell that, and so just sitting here like that is the craziest thing. Props to your instructor for literally creating probably what is our time like best EMS movie. And I'm not trying to like just like inflate your ego, but I think most people would agree like hands down phenomenal job. So So how did being a paramedic change the way you wrote scenes compared to what is normally portrayed on the screen about EMS?
That's actually a really good question. Actually, you're the first person to ask me that question. And I will tell you, there's Chris Leone is the director for anybody who's listening. He's a fabulous person. He's one of my closest friends now. We've gotten to know each other over probably 14 years. Uh, but when we first met, that was a big thing. So Chris has been a writer, director in the industry long before I met him. And he has this brilliant knack to write. He's a writer first. That's how we got his start. And when we first met, I was a staunch believer in like this is going to be a movie that is wild in that there was the original version of my script, which is trash, and I'm not defending it. Chris is right. Had no real narrative arc. It truly felt like you were on the truck. It was call after call after call after call. We were explaining things. There was a student that was already embedded in the original script. We had the jerk doctor. But it really, it from a structural perspective, it was very different than any movie that you've probably seen. And so we struggled a lot because we both agreed that there was never going to be a romance angle, right? Like there was never going to be like this, they fall in love with the nurse, the student, the doc, whatever. But we struggled for it really years because this was just a passion project. Nobody got paid until the cameras got turned on about how do we tell this story. And I was always beset on like, we keep hammering them. Like they go to the hospital, maybe they get a break, maybe they get a cup of coffee, but then boom, like, and originally we went from like tragedy to, alcohol overdose to heroin to cardiac arrest. And it was just, and Chris just kept pushing back. He was, that can't be real. I'm like, that is the job, man. Like, you go 2 or 3 calls where it's like we go pick grandma off the floor and then you have this horrendous car accident or a cardiac arrest or whatever. And the problem with that is it was entertaining, but there wasn't really a story and it felt more like a documentary. And so we worked really hard to try to bridge those two things where I would say that Code 3 is not a documentary, but it tells a compelling story. And that's all Chris. 1,000% Chris. I've got no formal training in screenwriting. This, having done literally one thing that I'm very proud of. That was kind of the creative tension there because I was, even at some of the darkest parts of the movie, I immediately wanted them to get another call. And he was like, that's too jarring. And I kept kind of grabbing him. I'm like, that's the point. I want to jar the audience. Like you go from this horrific thing to this benign, like my belly's been hurting for 3 weeks kind of thing. But that was, we came together and I'm proud to say that Chris is right.
Heck yeah. And I think that answers my next question. I was going to ask you, were there moments where you intentionally wrote things that only EMS people would truly understand? And I think that's it, right? Of just, it can be critical call, critical call, critical call, and then just pure boredom followed by, pure boredom or, critical call. So that's awesome.
I will answer this question though. There's a couple of little gags in the movie that are just for us. There is a scene where Rain specifically says the patient's assuming room temperature, and the not Pee Wee Herman, the Winnie the Pooh. Those are lines that are specifically tailored for the community.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. And I know exactly what scene you're talking about. That's super funny. So as a former medic, or like obviously you just got your medic back, right? So let's drop the former part. As a current paramedic, what inaccuracies in EMS movies drive you the most crazy? And then how did you avoid those in Code 3?
Shocking asystole gets me every time. I know it's a little thing, and I know that the prevailing knowledge out there is that, you shock the heart to start it again. That one drives me absolutely insane. Or when I'm trying to think of the movie. I think it's a Bruce Willis movie or Samuel L. Jackson movie where they load them in backwards. Where I distinctly remember it. Samuel L. Jackson getting loaded into the truck and his head is facing the tailboard. Because to me, those are very easy fixes. Like just talk to anybody who's done the job. I'm pretty sure the person who brought the ambulance to the set can answer this very simple question. The shocking asystole, and I think that the vast majority, if you've seen EMS outside of, the canon, Mother Jugs and Speed and Bringing Out the Dead, like everybody lives. And while I wish we lived in a society where we had magic powers and medics and EMTs could do that, um, that's one of those things that the tropes that always gets me is like everybody it's everything's terrible. And then finally you get the little, oh, he's alive. Um, and that always bothered me because I feel like we are setting ourselves up for failure because the community, the people that watch these films would just naturally assume that if we come through the door, we're going to save everybody's life. And I think that's a disservice. I think that the industry essentially is lying to people, and I don't particularly like that.
I
And
love.
what we did in Code 3 I mean, spoiler, people die in our movie. But the thing that I was hell bent on was that the monitors are accurate to the patient's presentation. We follow treatment protocols as closely as I could get them based on my experience and knowledge, and consulting with people that were working currently at the time. And we work really hard to tell an honest story. And the thing that I'm most grateful for is there's multiple things, but I was the on-set consultant, so I was involved daily with shooting. So I was on set every day, especially during the medical calls. And Chris and Rain and Rel and Amy were all committed to getting it right. So even there were some times that had to do multiple takes because their hand would be in the wrong place or they would say the wrong thing. And I will always be grateful to the fact that I'm not the director. I don't claim to be the director, but I would be able to be at the monitors with Chris and kind of tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hey, man, this is wrong. They said something wrong. Whatever, it doesn't look right." And they would defer to me and we would be able to do another take after some coaching or rehearsal. Um, and so I think that shows up on screen. And there's absolutely reality. Let me be clear, that they could have been like, whatever looks good on camera, go away. Right. Like that's absolutely a reality. Um, but they were committed and they were really invested in getting it right. And so I will always be grateful to all four of them for their commitment to that because they really didn't have to be.
I picture you standing there with a clipboard and an NREMT skill sheet, watching the scenes, marking them off like an instructor. And I'm sure that's exactly, don't ruin that for me. That's exactly how the whole thing played out. All right, quick timeout. This episode is brought to you by EMSConnect because EMS education shouldn't end when the tones drop. When you join EMSConnect, you get access to real-world education, engaging courses, live discussions, and a community built by EMS providers for EMS providers. No fluff, no check-the-box training, just practical knowledge you can actually use on shift for a price that's not going to break your wallet. And hey, if you're enjoying the podcast, do us a solid, rate, review, and share EMSConnect on shift. It helps us support EMS education everywhere and keeps this content coming. All right, back to the episode. Were there any scenes you wanted to write exactly as they happened in real life, but you had to adjust them for the film aspects? I think you're talking about the other way, but were there things that they were like, we need to make this a little more exciting or we need to change this a little bit? Was there anything like that?
There were a couple of scenes like that. So the Mr. President scene's much more long, is a lot longer, and there's a little bit more details written to kind of escalate that, but that got trimmed down. We had this great explainer. So one of the things in the movie is that we break the fourth wall, and there's a couple of fourth wall breaks that ended up getting cut, unfortunately, that we wanted to put in because there's such a great way to explain to the naive public about what's going on or what the thought process is or what's really going on in the patient's body and why are we doing the things that we're doing. Unfortunately, narratively, we couldn't do it because we worked really hard to make the film, a little over 90 minutes. We wanted to stick to that. We had some other scenes that were, one of the scenes that got cut that I agreed needed to be cut, but really hurt me because I really loved it was, they ran a call that wasn't in the film. That was really horrific and tragic. And then they have this brief respite and they're eating ice cream. Because one of the things that I used to do is like after a really bad call, me and my partner would go grab an ice cream cone, whatever gas station it is at 3:00 in the morning, to get rid of the juju and appease the EMS gods. Like that was our sacrifice to the EMS gods. Um, and we shot that scene verbatim is how my partner and I used to do it. And unfortunately, it doesn't resonate with enough of the audience to have it make sense. So I'm that one really hurt.
That ice cream is my thing. Like that would have resonated with me, and I'm really mad. Like they weren't able to leave that in. So that's 100% selfish, by the way. So how did you balance like the being able to show boredom mixed with chaos, dark humor, the intensity of EMS, but you did a great job of not glamorizing and sugarcoating it. So how did you find that good balance?
I have said from the get-go that I want this film to be a recruitment tool for EMS. And I feel the only way to do that meaningfully is to tell an honest story. And so I don't like sanctification or making people out to be heroes. I've been called a hero in the past, and I don't. It makes me uncomfortable. I understand why people do it, and I'm not going to insult them and yell at them and say I'm not a hero. But I feel that the important thing is showing the humanity of the job. And I've said for years that there's a nobility to EMS that I don't think the vast public understand. So for me, it's about telling all of those stories because that's the true experience. I used to joke that EMS is moments of or hours of boredom mixed in with moments of sheer terror. That was always my line when people would ask me what's it like being a paramedic, because we walk into these insane situations despite dispatch's best efforts. They're not there. They have no idea what we're walking into. And we've got to figure it out. And part of this is to showcase anyone who wants to get into EMS thinking they're going to put a cape on and save the world. Like, this is not that job. And for anybody who's considering getting into EMS, at least it's an honest look into it. Like, there are significant pitfalls as it relates to burnout, mental health if you're not taking care of yourself, physical health. But it can be one of the most rewarding jobs that I think exists. And so for me, the original short story, the original script, the first thing Chris read, always had a humor line through it. And if there are interviews with Chris, so I'm not speaking for him, these are words that he's actually said, is one of the things that drew him to the script was as he read it, that the best way to tell this story was through humor. And you see it through Randy's burnout and Amy's naivety, that there are moments there for natural humor, and then Rel just plays a straight guy almost throughout the entire thing, admittedly hilariously. But that's part of the honesty, is we wanted I have been on interviews saying that I think that dark humor, as gallowed and sometimes as terrible as it is, in small doses, is not only appropriate but required to do the job that we do, especially if you work 911. But, and please hear me when I say this but and the asterisks here, when it becomes your only personality trait, you should go get help.
Dude, that's so good. This is kind of off the cuff, just in my brain, where did the idea of Randy kind of telling this story come from in the script? Was that your idea? How did you guys come up with that? I love how it's him with this like monologue that goes on, kind of, walking through the hospital, talking about the different people as if they're not standing right there. Like, where did that idea come from?
That was the most cathartic scene to write. You're talking about the F everybody scene.
Yeah.
That was arguably my favorite scene to write in the entire, because that's how I felt. I won't speak for the profession. There were moments when I was deeply burnt out that was exactly how I felt. And there were conversations about cutting that scene, and I did almost the Gorbachev banging the shoe on the table and be like, you will not cut this scene. Like, I have no authority, but I am telling you, do not cut that scene. The short story that was written in college was always through one person's view with other people around to help explain and understand it. So that was always built in. The fourth wall break was a kind of a mechanism that Chris and I came on, because you have to imagine, again, if you count from when I wrote the short story to when we started filming, it's 15 years. If you measure from when the first time Chris and I got together, before he even agreed, we're talking 12, 13 years. And so Chris was always asking questions, as he should be. And part of that process was me just plainly explaining why we did this in the script. What was the choice there? Why do we treat people this way? Or, why is this the thing? Whatever. And finally, it just got so exhausting that, we couldn't find it, like just some random stranger in the film to explain things to. And Chris just said, we're going to break the fourth wall because it's the most honest way that you explained it to me. We're going to have Rain do that to camera. So it was always baked into the DNA, but to have it fleshed out where we do the actual fourth wall breaks where Rain talks directly to camera is really a mechanism to save time and give people the insights into why the decisions are being made and why we're doing what we're doing.
That's so good. That's awesome. So you brought it up, and I got a couple of questions related to kind of like that mental health piece of this, right? So the cumulative stress that EMS causes is pretty strong in the movie. How much of that comes from your own experience, or were you sharing, feelings that you had heard from other providers, or kind of how did you get to that point of you wanted that to be a core component of this movie?
The answers are both and. So I've been very open about my struggle with burnout and the emotional toll that it took on me. And you talk to your coworkers and you're hearing, it becomes an echo chamber. We're all suffering of the same thing. Now, again, giant caveat. I was an active medic from 2002 to 2012. So the lens in which I view EMS is dated, full stop. Resources have gotten better. Organizations, I believe, have trended in the right direction. They certainly haven't fixed everything, but you have to understand that I think I was kind of on the tail end of what I will lovingly call old school EMS versus where we are today. But yeah, that is a cumulative toll that we take. And for me, what it was is I was in college, and one of the things that I started to realize later on in my career that most of my friends are cops, firefighters, and medics, and I'm in college at a university with like 30,000 students around me, and the vast majority of my friends all work 911 in some way, shape, or form. And I remember distinctly, and I've told this story before, I had come to realize that I was getting burnt out. And I was using the words, I'm burning out. And I went to one of my supervisors at the time. And there's a whole reason why I don't name names because I don't blame them. They didn't have a better answer. And I went to them and I just said, hey, listen, like, I think I'm burning out and I think I might need some help. And the thing that I'll never forget is that person chuckled and said, we're all burnt out. Get back on the truck. And that was the first, last, and only time I asked for help until I was in grad school, or I'm sorry, until I was out of EMS. And the reason I tell that story is to let people know that that's not the right answer, but that was the only answer at the time. And I'm very, very fortunate. I did not suffer from suicidality. I didn't suffer from drug addiction or alcoholism. That doesn't make me better, stronger, more morally vibrant than people who have those issues. I'm just, thankfully, very lucky. That's it. But I have lost 7 coworkers across various agencies that have taken their own life. And so for me, it's a passion to make sure that we don't let that number increase. Because the scary statistic is those of us who work in EMS have double the suicide rate of the regular population for any number of reasons. The old saying, correlation is not causation. We don't know why, but I can take a stab at it. But I want people to get the help that they need before they know they need it.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's huge. When you were writing the movie and, talking through the script and, working on it, did it bring up any calls or emotions that you hadn't thought about that you'd kind of, whether you were good at processing them or bad at processing them, that you'd kind of logged away in a deep, dark place? And then here you are going through this script and going through your sticky notes and notes from calls. Did anything pop back up that you hadn't thought about in years? Or was it just kind of like pretty fresh in your memory of things that you wanted to portray in the movie?
It's funny when you start writing something like this, it's, this is going to sound campy, but it's like the happy memories. Like, oh yeah, like even the calls that are bad, you're like, this isn't the emotional trauma calls, right? Like I'm just writing like, oh yeah, then we did this and that, and yeah, grandma died or whatever. Um, but I will tell you, so throughout the writing process, rarely did it summon something that was like you said, like a core memory that's like, oh man, that's messed up. But the first time I saw the rough cut, which is literally just a bunch of scenes with no sound, no editing, it's just kind of like the best of everything we shot throughout the days, kind of put in a linear format. That's what the rough cut is. I bawled like a baby because it was almost like I was reliving my entire career because again, it's not an autobiography, right? Let me be clear. The main character's name's Randy. It's not Patrick. This is not Patrick's story. It was my best attempt to tell a universal story through my experiences. Um, but I couldn't hold back like all of exactly what you said, like all of the repressed stuff that I had kind of tried to uh, build a wall around and stuck down, and it just kept coming. I couldn't stop. Like it felt like a half an hour. Like we're both in like the sound booth watching this rough cut, and I'm bawling like a child. And I was just like, I need a minute. Um, but yeah, there's those calls will come back up, and I don't intend to traumatize anybody who watches the film, but having it be so personal to me was a watershed moment.
What do you think the public and even our administrators that might be a little bit out of touch with what we do still don't understand about EMS burnout and the stuff that we see on the street?
I think oftentimes they are concerned about the one bad call, right? Like the pediatric arrest, the pediatric trauma, the sex trafficking, or the abuse cases that will run. Those are horrific, by the way. I'm not downplaying them at all. Like I've seen, unfortunately, like many of you, enough to make my stomach churn. But I think that the recognition of what you said earlier, I think was perfectly placed. It's the cumulative stress over time. Um, it's the how many times we go into this nursing home because as providers, we know that these people are being neglected, but not in a legal sense. And there's that moral hazard of like, how do these people get away with this? And we are constantly seeing that. When we see resources being pulled away from, uh, uh, you know, uh, Narcan dispensers or something like that. When you see that, we're the ones who see that. We see the immediate impacts of public health policy quite literally on the front line. And I think those things over time amount to almost as much as those one horrific calls. And I think that with the best of intentions, and I'm not slighting administrators because I think I seriously doubt that any of them are like, our job is to make your life terrible. Like that's a cartoon, and anybody who believes that, I'm really sorry. Unless you have like Satan as a manager, which I know that they do exist. By and large, everybody's trying to do it for the right reasons. I think that sometimes they are myopically focused on the wrong thing and not taking into account the gradual amount of trauma that we experience on a daily basis. And I think a lot of us, hopefully, do a good job of processing that. But over a span of time, that will eventually eat you if you're not taking care of yourself. And I think that's the problem. I think the other major problem is a lack of resources, which again goes back to what I said earlier. I think with the best of intentions. I gave the keynote at the Colorado State EMS Symposium, and I said this on stage. I go, I've met with a lot of EMS leaders in leadership positions, and the first thing they tell me is like, we have a robust EAP program, an employee assistance program. And again, best of intentions. And I tell them that's fantastic. My follow-up question is, have you vetted it? Because I've tried to work with an EAP program, and you call the EAP, the 1-800 EAP number, and usually it's a coach, not someone who's clinically trained to be like a therapist. And you go, hey, I had a bad call. I'd like to talk to somebody. And they go, great. Here's a list of 20 people in your area. And then you start calling down that list. First person's dead. Second person's out of state. Third person's not taking any new clients. Fourth person has an opening 6 weeks from now. And while, yes, their EAP program is functional and they're paying for it, and it is a resource that you can utilize, oftentimes the very next step of how accessible is it? How fast can I go from, holy crap, that was bad, I want to talk to somebody, to button share talking to a clinician, not just my coworkers and friends. And to me, that's one of the biggest areas of improvement that I have seen based on my own career.
I love that. That's awesome. Do you see Code 3 as a way of serving the EMS community, just not in your current EMS uniform?
Absolutely. To me, it's one of the things I'm really proud of. In fact, when I get, I always said I'm not going to read the comments, which was lasted about 15 seconds. I try to read all the comments and reviews that I can get my hands on. And the ones that mean the most to me are the ones that are like, thank you for this film. So now I can show it to my family so they get some understanding about why when I get home, I go to the garage and I want to be left alone for an hour, or, um, showcasing this in a way that is not capes ablaze and we're out there saving lives every day. Um, those are to me the most important ones because it makes me feel that they get it. And what I've always said is my primary goal with this film is that people that are doing the job feel seen and validated and heard, um, and also be used as an advocacy mechanism, as a recruitment tool. Again, I think that's one of the main reasons because we are seeing a provider shortage. But I want to be honest about what the job is and an opportunity to see where some of there's opportunities for improvement for the field writ large, right? Like as a clinician, I'm not going to tell you to give albuterol versus racemic epi. That's not my specialty. Um, but we have brilliant physicians that really care and administrators that really care. And even at the state level, people who really care. What I want people to do is not brush under the rug the human toll that this job has.
Awesome. You kind of already answered this, but I kind of want to be like direct with it. So when paramedics and EMTs watch Code 3, what reactions or what reviews mean the most to you? Like, what do you log that is your moment of like, this movie has done what I wanted it to do?
I mean, I always love the one. I mean, selfishly, right? I've got an ego like everybody else does. Whenever I see the ones that are like, "Oh, you got it right," those are the ones that are really meaningful. Again, like I said before, the ones that are like, "Hey, we now have a way to talk about this job with our friends and family, and etc." Those are incredibly meaningful to me because that didn't really exist when I was coming up. Again, there was Bringing Out the Dead and Mother Jugs and Speed, neither of which I think did offer an opportunity to have a conversation. They were theatrical moments that are emblazoned on the Mount Rushmore of EMS films, but they didn't invite a conversation. I feel as well as Code 3 does. Um, but those are as far as reviews go, those are the things that really matter to me, and that people experiencing the film, if they've worked in this industry, to feel like um, we treated this job the way it deserved to be treated. We're not a cartoon, um, and we're also not Halo wearing heroes that kick down doors and save kittens. Um, but just to be very direct and say, like, this is what the job is. Here's what it meant to me, and here's what we hope will be a legacy for people that are either considering their work or in the job to that they find it valuable. To me, that's the stuff that matters.
Heck yeah. Have you, kind of two-part question, have you had any paramedics or EMTs tell you like that scene was my call, or that was my partner, or my favorite is that was the doctor I've worked with? Have you had them come to you, and then like what is your usual response to them?
Yeah, I have. It's been kind of funny. I don't have much of a social media imprint, but it's there, and so I'll get instant message when the film came out. Probably in the first month, I think I've gotten more messages than I've ever gotten before. But yeah, they're all comments like that, and that always makes me feel really great because I'm glad that it resonates with them, and that's usually what I say to almost all of them is some version of copy and paste of like, "Hey, I'm really glad the film resonated with you and that you liked it." That's really the goal, is to treat this job with the respect that it deserves. And yeah, I welcome all that stuff. I think it's funny. Some of the funnier reviews that I've seen is like, this movie is total bullshit. The cars get out of the way, and it's like, yeah, I know, we know, we shot the scene with the jerk BMW driver who doesn't get out of the way, and you know what? It's hilarious. It's hilarious when you shoot it, and then when you try to put it in the movie, it's for us, and it eats up 3 minutes of screen time. That is just, it just sucks the air out of the film. So I hear you. That scene is shot. It's just we don't have like a director's cut of the movie, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I mean, and then the critiques of like Dr. Serrano's a jerk. Yeah, I know, or the ones that are like no doctor is like that. Like, of course not. He is a cartoon. We needed somebody to stand up to Rain, and someone who could you could punch back to Rain. And in order to do that, we had to make like the biggest egotistical doc we could. So yeah, this film is not about ER nurses and doctors are terrible people and only EMS people are good. Like that's not what that is. But to tell a compelling story in 90 minutes, you need heroes and villains, and that's just how it shakes out. But I will say this: a lot of my friends are ER docs and ER nurses, and they're great people. And I've got people that I worked with on the ambulance that, I'm not particularly fond of. So reality is reality. This is just a movie, and I just hope people enjoy it.
Well, I'll tell you, selfishly, number one, I did say when I got done with the movie, I said the most unrealistic part of the whole movie is the fact that traffic moved out of the way. So I was one of those people that was like, oh, that's so comical just because I think it's great. And then second, we're secretly setting up our CEO because he hasn't seen it yet. We're going to be watching it at his house here shortly. And I've already laid the groundwork and have said the best part about the movie is I love the doctor. He's just like you. And I can't wait to physically see the look on his face when he realizes that I have been talking shit directly to his face for a couple of days. So I'm super excited. I'm going to intentionally not let him listen to this podcast for 4 days so we can watch the movie and let him realize that I've been talking shit to him the whole time. So I greatly appreciate that for you, or for you giving me that. So, has there been like one call or one part of the movie that you routinely hear from people like, that's real, that's the scene that really hit hard for me? Or is it kind of been all over the place between the doctor and one of my hands down favorite scenes is the nursing home scene, because I've been there of just like, oh, she was fine a minute ago. That whole scene is killer to me. So
Yeah, it's that scene. That scene, everybody comments on that scene. And for rightly so. Like that one's written pretty much verbatim from every nursing home call I've ever been on. But yeah, so that's the one that everybody relates to.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's the answer. It's the nursing home.
I think that might have been the pinnacle of my absolute like outward rolling on the floor laughing. Was that scene. I was like, this movie could end right now and it would be perfection. And you managed to just keep building on perfection. So solid work. So if you could talk to like a younger medic self early in your career, like what would you tell him about where you are right now?
I think the advice I give to everybody is, now that the film has come out, is vet a therapist now. And that doesn't mean like you have to, I'm not saying that everybody who works in EMS is broken and you got to go to therapy. But what I said earlier about the EAP programs, right? Find a therapist that you can meet with, that personality wise works with you, that takes your insurance, all of that nonsense. Get all of that stuff done today. So when you need them tomorrow, it's a phone call. I hope the vast majority of those of us that do the work are, we're functional, we're doing good. I hope you're all healthy, but do the work today. So that way, when you need them tomorrow, you don't have to go through this crap when you're feeling like garbage, and have that done. The second thing I tell everybody is take your vacation. You need to step away from this job. I loved everything about EMS. I lived and breathed EMS all through college. I still love this job. Sometimes the job didn't love me back. But what you need to understand is this job does take a toll on you, whether you think you're Superman and you don't have emotions or whatever. First of all, you're lying to yourself. That's a clear indication that you should start therapy, or at least have a significant conversation with somebody who is a clinician, not just your friends. But you need meaningful time away from this job. Do not let your supervisors or your director or whoever bully you into shortening that vacation or not taking the time that has been allotted to you, because you need to step away. You just do. Full stop. EMS is fantastic. I loved public safety. I loved the fire service. I loved EMS. I loved all of it. But like I said, sometimes it didn't love me back. You need to step away. You need to take meaningful time with the people that you like, or sometimes travel by yourself, whatever. You need to take your vacation. Lastly, make friends with normies. And what I mean by normies are people who don't wear a badge. You need to make friends out in the community that are like, teachers, engineers, whatever. Uh, People work at the city, the DMV employee, whatever. You need people who don't work in this field because they can be a wonderful mirror to you when you start to change and you can't realize it. Um, and that's crucial. And the last one is arguably, I think, harder than finding a therapist because nobody comes to your front door knocking and says, "Hey, let's go be friends." Like you have to put the work in. I'm sorry, you have to go find a hobby. You got to get out in the community. You got to go do something, and go make friends with those people because they are a wonderful buffer, and they will realize when you might need or start to spiral, and you might need to go seek better help. And that, to me, those three chunks of advice are things that I wish that I had known when I first got started. Because I drank EMS out of a fire hose and fire service literally out of a fire. Like I loved it, and that's important. You need to have passion for the work. You also need to realize when it's all consuming. I listened to somebody say it once. This job will give you everything, but it can also take everything away. It has a very sneaky way of being all consuming. And sometimes there are moments where that's important, but there is life outside of the job, and the industry. Let me be clear. It's not just about, working on a truck, but being able to get the resources that you need, is really important.
Damn, those might be the three best pieces of advice I think I've ever heard. So, phenomenal work, obviously coming from a lot of great experience and some good knowledge. So I appreciate you sharing those. What do you hope current EMS providers feel after watching Code 3, especially the ones who are tired or questioning staying, or if they get done with the movie and they're looking at Randy for a majority of the movie, and I'm not going to spoil anything. But what do you say to those people who are watching that movie and thinking that guy is me? What do you have to say to them?
I would say that I will say what I said earlier. This job, there is a nobility to this job that I was inherently drawn to and still am. I love everything about it. You need to understand that there is a life outside of this, and whether you choose to remain in this field or opt out, to go pursue some other career, passion, or whatever, both of those answers are okay. But what I hope is exactly what I said earlier, that they feel seen on cinema, and that there is a community of them. They're not alone. And I'll plug this now because I think you're kind of asking this inadvertently, but like, for anybody who is struggling with, suicidal thoughts or self-harm or whatever, like, go get help. Like, the world's better with you in it, even though your job might suck and you may not see a way out right now. There are multiple pathways that you can use your EMS experience in a different capacity. And sometimes people that I've worked with have not seen that bridge there. And I don't have the answer of like, go from paramedic to car salesman, right? Like I don't have all those answers, but just know that there are various different off ramps. There's various different opportunities that you can take. And if you choose to stay in EMS, if it's part of your DNA, if it's part of your blood, that's great. And I commend everyone who does that. Just know that you need to be able to step away from it. It's okay to say, I need to take a pause. And that even though this job feeds you to a certain extent, I'll use that broadly, there are other things that are more important than the work.
Those are great. Thank you so much. Couple of kind of just towards the tail end here. The first one, if I don't ask this, my wife will get super upset. So I got to ask this question, right? how did the process of getting Rainn Wilson go for you? Because I don't think you could have picked a more perfect, and I know the answer to this question, so I'm going to say it without like, you couldn't have picked a better person than Rainn Wilson. So how did that process look? Solid job, but what did that look like to get him as Randy?
Well, really, Rain just wouldn't stop calling me. That's really what it was. He was just like, I've heard about you. I need to talk to you. No.
You wish that was the answer.
Yeah, like of course. Like he just came to me.
Oh, naturally.
No, of course. He just looked me up randomly on the internet. It's like, that's a handsome looking guy. No. The very short version is once we got the script to a place where it was where that Chris and I felt like it was good enough to share around town, it was the opposite. Rain picked us. So it landed in Rain's lap. Rain read it, loved it, and got on board early. I think a year and a half before we actually started shooting. So he picked us, and he wanted to play Randy, which I was incredibly grateful for. You, like you said, you couldn't have asked for a more perfect actor for that. And to be frank, like when I was writing it, I didn't have an actor in mind. But as soon as I found out that Rain was interested, I was like, of course, you could not have picked a better actor for this role. And so I'm always grateful to Rain, because without him, we wouldn't have gotten made, because Rain liked it. Rain got us Wayfair, which was the studio, which then got us financing, and then kind of got us down the road to the actual filming of the project. So I had no say in it. He read it and he liked it, and he chose us. So it wasn't all the other casting decisions were made by the director. I'm not the director, but it was a really wonderful ride to be on.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Can you speak real quick? I mean, obviously we've talked about the realism and taking from your career. Can you talk real quick? What did the main characters, especially the EMS providers, what did they do to prepare for the roles? How much time did they spend on the street, or how did you, obviously you were there coaching them about, separate takes and hand placement and stuff, but how much knowledge did they get prior to stepping into those roles?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, actually. So I got them for 2 days prior to shooting. So we had all three of them came in, and we went to so Lifeline is the ambulance company in the movie. They're a real company here in Los Angeles. They were fantastic partners. So we got them as trained up as much as we could have. They all got healthcare provider CPR cards, so they all learned how to use a BVM and to do CPR well. That was one of my hills to die on, is that CPR will be done well in this film, because I firmly believe that people will do what they see in the movies. And so we got them all CPR certified, but it was really kind of a funny happenstance. So I had some connections with LA County Fire, and through those connections, I said, basically, like, I have these actors for a day. I need the busiest house by statistic, because we only got them for like 12 hours. And the short version was, they said South Central, which is LA County Station 14. And so I drove over to LA County to Station 14, threw one of my old firefighter t-shirts on, knocked on the door, had no relationship with the captain there, and just said, hey, I've got a very bizarre request, but totally fits in LA, and explained what happened, what was going on. And they were very gracious. Those guys were fantastic. They were like, yep, we set a date, and we said, yep, they can come and ride along. And so Amy and Rain and Chris did almost 12 hours of ride time with LA County Fire. And the way EMS works in LA County is that the paramedics are on the fire truck, and they'll go out and respond. And if it's a BLS call, the private agency will take the call, will take the patient, transport them to the hospital. If it's an ALS call, the paramedic will get off the fire truck, jump into the ambulance, and proceed to provide ALS care all the way to the hospital. So it's different than where I came from, but it worked. So the beauty of that is LA County responds, obviously, to medical and fire. And so for like 10 hours, the three of them got thrown in the back of the truck, and they got to see all the stuff. We were very fortunate. There was a busy day. So they got some ODs, they got a cardiac arrest, they got some pick grandma up off the floor. But they got kind of like the wide variety of calls that are available to us. So that was the first step. And I'm very grateful that they signed up to do that and didn't run away screaming, scared. And then that second day, where we took them to Lifeline, their training center, they come through the doors and they all start gravitating towards the toys. They all want to start playing with the laryngoscope and the dummies and the IV equipment. And I kind of stopped them and I was like, nope, we're going in the back. We threw them in the back of an ambulance and I said, don't put your seatbelt on. That bar is all you got. And we drove them around downtown LA for about a half an hour. And they came back kind of eyes the size of dinner plates. And they were like, how do you do this? And we're like, now you know. And then from that point forward, we taught them how to intubate. We taught them how to do CPR, stuff that was really script intensive. So like some of the backboarding was a big thing. When I know backboards are now falling out of favor, my apologies to anybody who watches this in 2030. It's all I know, or knew at the time. So we taught them how to immobilize. We taught them how to put seat collars on. We taught them all of that stuff because the goal was not to make them paramedics, but to make them believable. And so they could fumble around and break stuff and mess up when they're with us. And then when they're on camera, hopefully it looked legitimate and real. So they were dedicated. They worked really hard on it. And then during any of the more medically intensive scenes that you see on screen, we would rehearse with them for like a half an hour before we turned the cameras on. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Randy is named after my paramedic instructor, Randy Ramadka, who you could see him in the film and in the waiting room of the emergency room. I was able to bring him in so that way he could be a part of the film. And then Mike is named after one of my old partners that I went to paramedic school with. And he happened to be on set the day we did the baseball scene. And so the funniest part about that was Mike and I kind of ran off to the corner and said, okay, so here's the scenario. Here's what we're doing. And so him and I fell right back into our old habits, right? Like I'm grabbing this, he's doing that. We do it a couple times and we feel real confident about it. And we show up, and this is a really hard story to tell because we're not spoiling anything. And we bring it to the actors and we're like, all right, cool, watch us. And we do all the things and, boom, we're packaged in 5 minutes and we're going down the road. And they just stop us and like, absolutely not. We don't know at all what you're doing. And they really asked us to break it down, less so as a clinician, because Mike and I both were treating it like clinicians, right? Like you're going to listen to lung sounds, you're going to do this and that, and it's like, it finally hit me like, this is make believe. Like we're not worried about, is the patient going to have a good clinical outcome? This is going to look good, like on camera. And so, later on in that scene, Amy's got a little notepad that she's taking notes. And if the camera could flip and you could see what the notepad says, it literally says, put right hand here, stand here, do like step by step by step. That's not clinical, but it's where to sit, where to put your hands to make it look right on camera. So we were very fortunate to be able to train them and that they took it seriously. So I was very grateful, but I had to take my teaching hat off because for the first week of shooting, I was trying to teach them like they were paramedics, like they would care about, what the appropriate blood pressure should be and what's the respiratory rate and what the lungs. And they're like, yeah, we don't care about any of that. Just where do we put the stethoscope?
That's so awesome. What a fun inside look of like behind the scenes. I wish I don't ever want a sequel. Maybe financially you do, and I totally understand, but I think there just needs to be like a director's cut, and maybe that will be the big unveiling at some point. That's my own selfish hope down the road. But we've talked a ton about like how you wanted providers to perceive the movie. What is one quick thing, like as a family member watching this movie, of maybe getting a look into the EMS world they've never seen of their loved one, or even the general public? I think one of the best scenes is the diner scene and the public interrupting with the one question we all cringe usually at hearing. But what do you hope the public takes away from it, as well as families of EMS providers, whether that's immediate family or extended families of EMS workers?
Well, I think again, I was very fortunate. So my brother is a producer on the movie, so he was with us for shooting the entire time as well, and he said something that was really impactful to me. Now, arguably, this is not about me, but I think this is the sentiment: is that he had read every version of the script. He was intimately involved in all of the production portions of this, but when he actually saw it for the first time on screen, he pulled me to the side and he was like, and now I get it. Like I didn't, when you were telling stories around the kitchen table or whatever, like we just thought these were stories. And I think it brings a level of reality into our world that, again, with the best of intentions, I don't think people are inherently bad, but I don't think they grasp what it's really like. And so for people who don't work in EMS, who don't work in 911, I think it allows them a voyeuristic view in and to better understand the structures that support society. Um, and that's always something that I always remember, that always meant something to me, is like, I hope that whether they know somebody that works this job or whether they just went to go see a movie full of popcorn, um, that there is a growing appreciation and a better understanding of what the job is. Because, the number one insult that we're not allowed to get mad at is being called ambulance drivers. Um, and I've said this publicly at various conferences that I've been at. Like, if you are in your community and you're being called an ambulance driver, that's your organization's fault. That's not the person who's saying it, because we do a really bad job of telling our own story. And if you're still being referred to as an ambulance driver, that means that your organization needs to be more invested in telling the public about what it is that we do. That way, we are called paramedics and EMTs, and explaining better what it is that we do, what our processes are, what to expect. And that requires a significant amount of work, usually from the PIO. But that means, like, you got to go to the synagogues and the churches and the farmers markets and the touch-a trucks and all that stuff. But you have to put it, not you, but your organization needs to put in the work, so that way people gain a better appreciation of what it is that we do. And that has multiple positive effects. That offers up the next time you come up for a tax incentive, if you're tax based, if more people understand what it is that you're doing and the level of training and blah blah blah, the easier it's going to be to get that reform passed, right? If you want to talk to the federal government about reimbursements and your congressman, like, that only happens through education and people understanding what it is that we do. So my hope is that this movie helps, but it is not the cure all. The rest of the industry relies on all of you. I'm happy to have started something, or at least add to the conversation, but the carrying of the torch requires active involvement by the rest of the community.
That's so good. So along those lines, what's one thing EMS still needs to start talking about out loud?
I think it goes back to, oh wow. I'm going to answer it in two ways. So I think what EMS providers need to start talking about more out loud is that getting help is not a sign of weakness. And I know that there has been, again, I am well aware that mentalities have shifted, but I think it can be better. I think we can do things like active debrief, where if you or your supervisor knows or sounds like it's going to be a bad call, that they can start having those, they can stage those resources, so that way when that call clears, they can immediately have some 20-minute break and have, like, the chaplain or someone, whoever's trained, and I want to be clear about this, trained to do a CISD debrief or just a quick venting of what happened on that call. And to see that further help beyond the confines of where you work is okay and necessary, and the ability to step back and take vacation and time, etc., is okay. What I think what we need to do broadly for the public is exactly what I just said. I think we are required to tell our story in a more meaningful, better way to the community at large. Um, and that doesn't mean, like, you listening to this podcast need to do both of those things, but you asked what we need to start talking about. And I think those are the key things that we need to be able to do, because we have been the stepchild of public safety for far too long. We're also the youngest, but we are now coming up on 50, 60 years old. Like, we are no longer a toddler. Like, we have to share our own story, and we have to do it better than it's been done in the past.
Heck yeah, dude, that's so good. So here's my last question for you. And then if anything else you want to add, you're more than welcome to. But what do you want to see for Code 3 moving forward? Like, what do you hope is the next step for this whole journey you have been on?
I mean, it's been a dream. I don't know. I would love to be able to make a sequel or make it into a TV show, or anything like that. Like, this has been a ride of a lifetime that I'm incredibly grateful for. As far as where we can go from here, it's kind of, um, I think the most viable path is probably turning it into like a series like The Pit, but we're working on trying to see if that's a viability or not, if there's an interest for that. Um,
I'll
but
watch
as
it.
far as
How's that?
creative,
I will watch it. That's all. Like,
perfect.
yes, there's an
That's all I
interest
needed
from
to
me
know.
directly.
Uh, but yeah, we're actively, Chris and my brother and I are working to develop a pitch for that, um, to try to make it into like an episodic kind of thing. But I mean, selfishly, like I've written a few other things, and we're trying to have conversations and see if that are not EMS related. Just to, I would love nothing more than to make my career in make believe for the rest of my life. But uh, it's been very very fun. I will tell everybody it's not as lucrative as people think. Like I'm not a millionaire. No one got paid $1 million on this project, so it's like I said, we worked for literally 12 years together and not a paycheck made until the camera turned on. Um, but it's been a lot of fun. Um, and then you asked me if there's anything else that I want to add, and I've ended every interview with this exact same thing because I think it's so incredibly important. And that is like, if you are currently doing the job, I know you'll never hear it enough because I lived that job for 12 years. And you're going to hear from me today. Thank you for what you do because I think it matters. Not that I think it matters, I know it matters. You are saving lives, and I deeply appreciate whatever it is you do, wherever it is that you work, because frankly, I don't care. I don't care if you're a first responder, an EMT, a medic, a critical care medic, whatever. Uh, I appreciate what you're doing because it matters to your community. And I know that in times of crisis, very rarely do people say thank you. So you're going to hear from me today. So thank you for what you do.
Dude, that's awesome. I literally can't thank you enough for joining us. I know there's big stuff coming for you and for the movie, and I just can't thank you enough to taking time out of your busy day, whether it's actually busy or it's just my interpretation. So I want to say thank you so much, and I greatly appreciate you spending time with us, sharing your thoughts and all your dreams that went into this, all your hard work, all your on-set mentoring and making sure the actors did it right. So I just want to say thanks, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Have a good one, sir.